We all do it as we go for a dog walk. We pick up a poop, probably with one of those plastic bags that you have hanging from your leash. But did you ever consider what the environmental impact is of all of those poop bags? In fact, did you know that there are over 200 billion pounds of poop that are pooped out every year, and a lot of it is collected in those little plastic bags? They add up, and that adds up for our environmental impact. And what happens with all of that? Well, on today's episode of The Long Leash, we are going to explore that with an entrepreneur who has come up with a very clever and very obvious solution to how to pick up after our dogs. We are speaking with Tracy Rosensteel. She is the CEO founder of a company called Pooch Paper. This is a great conversation. I enjoyed it because not only is Tracy a passionate dog lover, but as you will hear, she is a passionate entrepreneur. Combine those two together and you get an interesting combination. And that's what you will hear on our conversation today on The Long Leash. Tracy Rosensteel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So when I say 200 billion pounds of dog poop every year, what do you think?
I think it's a huge opportunity is what I think.
There is the entrepreneur and why you have so richly got the moniker from Shark Tank of Wall Street, Tracy. That's awesome. So
Thank you.
So basically you have built a company around the fact that our best friends are depositing poop every day. And for a lot of people, that is being picked up and scooped up by those little plastic bags that we see everywhere. What's the problem with that?
So the problem is, apparently worldwide, we have about 1 trillion single-use plastic bags used every single year. 380 billion of those are from the United States. And of those, about 500 million are single-use plastic dog waste bags. So as with anybody trying to make some kind of a difference in this world, you can't change and fix everything. But if you were to just change one piece of a problem and each person would maybe try to change a little bit of a problem, you'd reach some kind of a threshold where problems are solved, right? So the problem with the single-use plastics for dog waste is kind of twofold. So number one, any kind of plastic that's non-biodegradable is obviously not good for the environment, and can pose all kinds of issues. But the bigger issue we're kind of tackling is the microplastic pollution, which is caused by, frankly, biodegradable bags and quote unquote eco-friendly bags. So what happens is for those types of bags to reach in this country, ASTM D6400 certification, they have to inject what's called EPI into the manufacturing of the bags in order to hasten the breakdown of the plastic. But instead of the plastic disappearing and biodegrading, instead it breaks into hundreds of millions of microplastic particles that enter the air we breathe, the water we drink, and ultimately the food we consume. So in 2020, even Consumer Reports came out with a cover story that was titled Eat Less Plastic. They're one of many who have conducted similar reports, and their findings showed or indicated that humans ingest a credit card size amount of plastic. Guess how often?
Annually?
Every week.
What?
Yes.
So microplastics is a new thing because we don't have a lot to be afraid of these days.
Right.
Because everything is just like clear sailing. There are no risks out there in the world. But a new one that you're making me aware of is microplastics. We eat a credit card size piece of that much plastic every week.
Every week. Yeah, and that's due in large part to biodegradable or eco-friendly plastics. And that includes, of course, plant-based plastics and other non-fossil fuel type recycled plastics, because it's still the plastic. The injection still takes place to meet the requirements of the standardized threshold to be able to market your product as an eco-friendly product. So unfortunately, what happened is, in order to, meet the breakdown requirements, something had to be done for plastic, since it's an inorganic product to break down. But again, it doesn't get broken down by enzymes in the earth and naturally return to its, original state, because plastic, as we all know, is not an organic product compound.
So all those biodegradable poop bags that I have purchased over the years are contributing to microplastic problems that result in me eating a credit card.
Unfortunately, I have to say, yes, it is.
Okay, this seems like a big problem. What are the health risks of consuming microplastics that are inorganic?
No, good question. They carry in large part heavy metals, carcinogenics, or they are carcinogenic, rather, I should say. In addition to that, they're found everywhere. Already they've been found in placenta. They permeate cell membranes. I mean, they're really contributing to a lot of the larger, longer-term life health concerns that people are seeing across the globe.
Okay.
And let me add,
I am appropriately concerned about microplastics, and you have at least a small part of the solution in terms of Pooch Paper, a totally different take on poop bags.
Yes. Yep. And so I'm just going to add real quick one other, side effect, you would call it, of putting animal waste in any plastic and then having it be discarded in a landfill type environment is methane gas is created. And methane gas has been shown to, again, depending on the study you look at, but up to 87% times more toxic to the environment than carbon dioxide within its first 2 years of release. So that's a whole nother one as it relates to global warming. So Pooch Paper is seeking to mitigate those two issues.
Okay. And so for those folks who have not had the good fortune of using Pooch Paper, how do you describe it?
Okay. So first of all, we source everything in the USA, so made in the USA. Pooch Paper, the paper is made from recycled non-chlorine bleach paper fiber. It's manufactured using renewable energy at our carbon neutral facility. It's 100% actually biodegradable, 100% compostable. And the grease-resistant coating that is found on both sides of the sheet, so the waste remains inside the paper and not on your hand, is made during the pulp drying process in what's called a Yankee dryer. So it's made naturally and organically, which means instead of being applied after the fact, it's actually PFAS free. And the PFAS movement is slowly, just like the single-use plastic legislation that we see sweeping the globe, frankly, is starting to come up as another hot topic. Apparently, PFAS chemicals are a byproduct of much manufacturing, and once they saturate soil, they don't go away. So we're the only product on the market in this category that can claim PFAS free.
Okay, so again, let's describe what a Pooch Paper is. When you're holding it in your hand, it is distinguished from, I don't know, a sheet of newspaper, a newsprint. In what ways? It has the plastic coating.
No plastic.
Or the what's the coating?
The PFAS free coating. PFAS. Yep. So it is coated on both sides of the paper. So if you pick up after your animal,
what is it coated with? I understand it's PFAS free, but what is the actual?
It is created in a Yankee dryer when the pulp is drying and adhering to itself. So it's not added. It's not a chemical additive after the fact. It's naturally or organically created while the paper is drying and, I guess, solidifying unto itself as far as the pulp itself. Anything further, I'm going to have to get an engineer on the phone.
Okay, we need a chemist on this. Okay, so basically it is something that is impregnated into the
Correct.
Paper pulp when the sheets are made that creates this thing that prevents the poop from going
on your hand.
getting into your hand.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And they're made here in the United States.
Made in the USA. Yep. All of our
Okay.
components are, from the dispensers that go into parks departments and walking trails in cities to the boxes that we have 2 sizes for retail, including the paper and including the pouches to carry them on your leash. So everything's made in the USA.
Okay, so that's sort of the background. Let's get to the genesis of this, because you're not just an entrepreneur. You are a big dog lover.
Yes, I am. So I have, a 10-year-old French bulldog who sadly I had to put down about a month and a half ago. I can only speak about it without crying right now because I found a new Frenchie. And as far as I'm concerned, magic in the universe happened and he just came back with an upgrade. So
that's awesome. Yeah. And this Frenchie's name had its own book series.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Well, his name in real life is Indiana Jones. And for obvious reasons, I couldn't use that in my book publications.
Really? Did you run into some issues there? Yeah.
Ones I couldn't afford.
Okay. So his nom de plume is
Little Boo. So the book series, yep, we have a few. The one that was selling in New York at Tavern on the Green is about Tavern on the Green. And the book series would be described as kind of a Shel Silverstein meets Dr. Seuss because they're rhymey and it's about a man about town French bulldog in Manhattan and all his little adventures therein. So they're cute. They're meant to be bedtime stories to a young audience.
That is awesome. And I love the fact that it is centered at such a landmark restaurant as Tavern on the Green.
One of my favorite places.
I have some fond memories of that. So New York is so much a part of who you are and built into your DNA. We were talking that portrait behind you is kind of a little bit of New York, even though you're not living in New York. For those, because we were talking before we started, tell us about the portrait now that I've mentioned it.
So it's the original hanging in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York is a John Singer Sargent of Madam X. And it's my favorite. In all of the world, it's my favorite portrait. And I believe at the Paris Salon, the original, there's some speculation about who is Madam X. So there's some mystery around that. And she has a particular, look about her. But the original on her dress, her strap was down. And that was very risque. Yeah, back in the day. And they made him paint that out and put it back up before they hung it in the salon, which I thought was funny. But it has a very interesting history to it. So it's one of my favorites.
So you had someone commission a copy so that you could
have it in my home.
Because you couldn't get the original to put in your new home in you're in Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
But New York is, whether it's Tavern or in the Green or the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, plays an important background for who you are and your relationship to dogs and basically how Pooch Papers started.
Definitely. Yep. I was there 16 years. And when I came up with the idea for Pooch Paper, I at the time had about a 7-year-old French bulldog. So the original Indiana Jones, I've named him Indiana Jones. So I'm just moving forward. But anyway, he was probably about 6 or 7. And I really started kicking the idea around thinking, at every single street corner, there is a garbage bin. And at the end of the day, it's filled with single-use plastic bags. And of course, they stink because there's methane gas inside of them and all the rest of it. Anyway.
Well, that's not the only reason.
I'm sure there's all kinds of things. I thankfully never had to go through one, so I'm not sure. I'm blessed in that way. But anyway, I was thinking, all right, I wonder if there's some kind of a market here because the legislation was looking to be passed in New York City. And at the moment, currently, there are 10 states who have enacted legislation around single-use plastics. And then about 341 or 2 or something cities outside of those states.
And what is the legislation calling for?
So it varies. It's a single-use plastic ban overall or overarching. It varies on where you live in the country, but the base common denominator through all of the different legislation is that that particular city or state is no longer allowed to hand out for free single-use plastic bags. So whether you tax them or you charge the consumer or, something of that nature. And what's nice about Pooch Paper, now that we work with municipalities and multi-tenant residential buildings and so on, and, cities and parks and rec, we work very well to have them be compliant with their own legislation, because if you're handing out a plastic poo bag for free in a park, albeit maybe not in writing by law, it's certainly nice for the person asking you not to do it to not do it also.
That is fascinating. So single-use plastics is not a ban that is only related to poop bags. It's like here in Maui County where I live, we have had that for over a year or two now, where all those plastic bags at the shop are gone, and you have to use a paper bag or you have to bring your own sack.
Correct.
That didn't always work so well. So then we moved to paper.
Yep.
And so one of your ability in terms of market growth is to go to these communities
Definitely
that have enacted this. And there are 10 across the
country.
There are
10 states who have enacted that legislation statewide, and Hawaii, funny you mention it, is one of those states. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Well, we try to take care of the environment.
I have a call with a few of your senators in about a week's time, so we'll see how we do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I would love to have those poop bags available. And speaking of that availability, you have modeled your business in such a way that this isn't something that you can just individuals can buy, but communities can buy, and these can be in multi-unit dwelling environments.
Yep, correct.
Okay. So eventually your vision, I guess, is to go to a dog park and be able to have Pooch Papers.
Yep, correct. Yeah. So we have municipalities who have converted from plastic to Pooch Paper, and those communities span about 9 states right now and growing every day. And we've been leveraging some organizations around the country, like the National Recreation and Park Association. We were just asked to please participate on the Business Council that they're kicking off in February for the first time, which is great, because what they're looking to do is to align government and private sector in a first ever coordinated effort to put forth best practices. Apparently, Parks and Rec comprise 3% of the total GDP for the U.S. So, yeah, I found that fascinating too. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You have lots of interesting information.
Oh, thanks.
I want to take a break right now, but when we come back, I want to talk with you about how you funded this, because you there's an interesting story there. We'll be right back.
And now, a message from your dog.
Every day with you is like a day at the beach. And I want as many beach days as possible. I want to run and sniff and find a good stick to carry. I want to roll in the grass and warm my belly in the sun. I want to walk with you, run with you, sleep with you, eat with you. And when I eat with you, I want Everpup. The green, grassy beef liver spiked smell wakes my senses. You may not realize this, but it tastes like homemade gravy, especially when you wet it. It infuses any food you give me with health and life and vibrancy. I can feel it. Everpup traveling to every cell in my body, nourishing each one. Does it roll back time? Of course not really, but it helps me feel like I'm on top of the world. I'm so glad you're giving it to me every day, because every day I'm so glad to be with you. I'm so grateful to be your dog and for the Everpup you give me.
So now that you know what your dog wants, get Everpup, the ultimate dog supplement. Everpup is available in select pet shops and on Amazon. But to get the best price possible, join the Everpup Club at everpupclub.com, where you'll get your first jar for just $8 with free shipping anywhere in the U.S. Go to everpupclub.com and use the discount code DPN. That is everpupclub.com. Everpup, every day.
We're back with Tracy Rosensteel. Tracy, when you had this idea for Pooch Paper, you were in New York, you knew you wanted to build a company, and how did you fund it?
So I've spent about 22 years on Wall Street in various roles. So the first 2 roles, I lived in Chicago at the time. Back in open outcry Wall Street days, I worked to support mission critical trading floor technology with the Chicago Board of Trade, the board options, and the Merck. And I did that with 2 different global vendors, the 2 primarily in that space at that time. And then I decided I wanted to start my own business. I kind of learned the ins and the outs of both of those 2 global entities and how they did things and how I might be able to do them better. So I created a consultancy, and I basically took the 10 collective years and ran for another 10 years and sold my process by which I supported and installed and programmed and trained on trading floor technology back to my 2 former employers.
So you decided to do an IPO to build Pooch Paper.
It wasn't an IPO, but no, but I was fortunate. And that's actually what brought me to New York in 2007, was starting that firm and then growing it. And I had the opportunity to grow. They had a few changes with my clients in New York. And I ended up growing a small opportunity to a multi-million-dollar opportunity, and had about 15 people on my team at our busiest. And then sold the balance of my contracts back in 2016. So I've always funded all my side projects. We don't have nearly enough time to talk about all of them. None of them are making me any money at the moment. But anyway, I took Pooch Paper and I self-funded.
That's awesome. I like you're an entrepreneur at heart, and I really appreciate that. Who's helping dogs. So where we're going with all of this, of course, is you made it onto Shark Tank, and there's an interesting story there, because I think they asked you to come on, and then you said no, and then they asked you a second time.
Yeah, I actually, I think I'm trying to think how the progression went. I put my hat in the ring originally. And I was lying in bed. I typically watch Shark Tank at night when I'm going to bed. And this is in my New York studio, small apartment. So my TV's right there. And I thought, I wonder what the process is to get on, because I was kicking the concept around with Pooch Paper. When I had gone on Shark Tank, it was the very, beginning days, frankly, of Pooch Paper. And possibly had I held it back for 1 year, it might have been, more productive, but you never know. Anyway, so I was lying in bed thumbing with my thumbs an online form to fill out and submit my idea to Pooch Paper. And the whole time,
tiny little forms that are not very mobile friendly.
Yeah, I thought, there's no one's going to read this. Like, there's just no way. Anyway, about 2 weeks later, my phone rang, and it was the casting team from Shark Tank. So originally I was asked to please continue, but this was, I believe, in 2018. And I was probably a week or 2 out from officially getting all my paperwork in for patent coverage. And I looked at the mountain of paperwork they required, and I wasn't comfortable at that time sharing a lot of the, company specific information. So
because you wanted to protect the IP as you formalized the patent.
Yeah, exactly. So then that happened, and then months passed. As I recall, that was September of 2018. And then in I guess it wasn't until 2020 at the beginning of the year that I reached back out. And I think what I did was find a good number of emails and just went a different route and proposed, my throwing my hat in the ring. And then one of the folks from the show passed my email on to the producer, and I in turn heard from him, and he said, I understand you already tried this once. Would you like to, officially participate? And so that kicked off what ended up being about a 4 or 5 month process prior to filming.
So walk us through what's that like? I imagine they shoot in Los Angeles.
They typically do, but I filmed during COVID. I was part of the COVID season.
So you were able to zoom in your pitch?
No. What happened was, in order to create, in essence, a COVID bubble and keep, a very clean environment, which included rebuilding the soundstage, they chose to film it at the Venetian in Las Vegas. So it was really...
That's where you want to go to avoid COVID. It's a casino.
I know. Well, they had, the conference space, and that was on lockdown, as were all of the rooms. And they were pretty strict protocols in place back then, because you can imagine one person gets sick. They're obviously putting millions into the production of this season, and they can't afford to not stay on track. So, the process after that, they always warn you there is definitely a potential to not get aired. I think each year the statistic is 40,000 people apply each year, 40,000, and about 160 actually go film, and somewhere around 125 actually air. And I could be wrong by a couple of digits on those, but I think that's in large part the ballpark numbers. But anyway, so they always...
So you made an impression. Your segment was good enough to air.
Yes, I guess so. Which is good. But yeah, we arrived, and there's a COVID test before the airplane, a COVID test when you get off the airplane, and then it was 11 days of lockdown, which is pretty tough to stay in a hotel room and not go in the hallway. You really were on lockdown for 11 days. I think I had one 5-hour dance party.
Nice sweets, but after a few days, probably not all that exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'll never stay at the Venetian again. Sorry, Venetian.
Prison.
Yeah, beautiful rooms, but not for 11 days.
Okay, so after the lockdown and you come in for the day of taping, what is that like? How does that go?
So it's, again, in normal times, it's probably not quite like this, but I was picked up in my room at about 7 a.m, which meant I got up at 4. I made sure to get showered and ready and not be rushed. I called my girlfriend, so I was on. I had probably a pot of coffee and a blender of smoothie. And anyway, so 7 a.m, I saw the feet under the door. I thought, we're ready to go. So I took my headphones off of pumped up music, and went down to the ballroom, and we were kind of quarantining in areas in the ballroom. And at that time, they filmed 8 episodes, like 8 segments per day. So the 4 in the morning, they break for lunch, and 4 in the afternoon. I was number 4 in the morning, which is perfect. I thought that's a pretty good lineup. People probably want to get lunch, so hopefully it would be easy enough. But anyway, and you walk in and they show you where to stand on the floor, and, have 5 minutes of checking the backdrop, to make sure your art is where you need it to be and your product is positioned and all that type of thing. And then, when it's your turn, you walk up to the doors and you can see through and see how the cameras are getting ready. And there's the gentleman with the mic, and he's all right. Now, when you hear the buzzer and the clear, I'm counting back from 7. I thought, oh my God, like, when you're on a roller coaster and you get to the top and you're like, you know what? On second thought, I don't think I want to go down.
But you already built it in. Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I really want to do this. Right now I can see my heart beating out of my chest. Anyway, and I was mic'd up, obviously. I'm like, can you hear my heartbeat through this mic? I think you can. Anyway, but then you walk through, and then they make you stand on the tape and then don't start. So they have, I don't know how many cameras, do close-ups and all that kind of thing. And until the producer says, and go, then you start going. But in the meantime, you have all the sharks staring you down. It's kind of intimidating.
Oh, how long does that, do all those close-ups last while they're staring you
Probably
down?
A minute to a minute and a half, but it feels a lot longer than that.
Little extra intimidation factor.
But it was nice. Lori, I was wearing a pair of shoes that she really liked. So I'm standing there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to pass out because I'm so nervous. And then Lori says, I know we're supposed to be quiet, but where did you get your shoes? And thank God, because it got me laughing. It got me over my, nervousness. And before I knew it, we talked a little bit about the shoes. And then the producer said, and go. So I was warmed up and laughing, and it was, thank God for Lori doing that.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So how does your pitch go? How do you start your pitch? I'm sure you remember it.
Oh gosh, you know what? I don't know if I do. Hello Sharks. My name is Tracy Rosensteel, founder of Pooch Paper. I'm what I'm seeking, right? And then what's the common denominator with all the poop bags is plastic, whether you're upcycling or recycling or whatever. And then, you know, how about the alternative paper? And then I did my little demonstration of how to use a Pooch paper. And then because it's not a bag, it's a sheet. It's a take, twist, and toss. And when you twist, it stays shut. And it's the grease-resistant coating that's on both sides that holds it shut. It will not open unless you on purpose open it. And I bought for the pitch a garbage can that you could see through on purpose so that the sharks could see that it doesn't open. So just before I landed the plane with my entire pitch, I threw the garbage in the trash, and Kevin sits up and he says, wait a minute. Why doesn't it open? I can see that stayed shut. How did that happen? I'm like, oh man, he completely interrupted my pitch. So I answered the question, of course. And then I said to the producers, I said, do you want me to go back and redo that? So they said, sure. And I have a travel show that's on Amazon. So I'm familiar with needing to pause so they can edit whatever. So I sat there for 5 seconds. And then I started in as though I had just finished. And then I stopped and everyone was quiet. So I looked, I'm like, okay, I'm done. That's it.
That's awesome. So your TV background, the fact that you had done some TV production over the years helped you kind of nail it in terms of the pitch. And you mentioned Kevin, because Kevin was the shark that ended up investing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And he did one of his famous royalty deals.
Yeah.
For those people who are listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, and who have never heard of these royalty deals, how does that work?
So the deal that he proposed was $1 for every box I sold in perpetuity. So at the time that I was forever and ever, so at the time I was on Shark Tank, I only had one SKU, one size, one retail box. At the moment, we have 7 SKUs. So within 6 months, we added 7 more SKUs to the mix, which includes a larger size sheet for larger dogs. But the royalty deal, it ended up, we didn't do it in real life, but on TV, he did offer the deal. Would work out where for every box sold, I would owe Kevin $1 in exchange for his proposed $250,000 investment. So what was I going to say? But before that was frankly, because it was so early on in the process or the life cycle or life stage of this business, I really didn't want a big investor from the standpoint of giving up a big chunk of, equity. So I did want a royalty deal. I did want to do a deal with Kevin. So it was exactly what I was hoping for. And I also, knowing the show and knowing Kevin, I figured I probably wouldn't get it under $1. So before I ever arrived, I figured out a way to save $1 on per box with my suppliers, and I was able to kind of bake that into the cost of my overhead anyway. So it would have been a great deal.
Okay, so you had sort of calculated the math, and you knew you had a good deal. So what ended up happening?
So after we wrapped up, after you film, then you get interviewed a couple more times, and then you meet his team if there was a deal to be done. And then I said, look, I got to leave. I've been 11 days in one room. I'm out of here.
I am so out of this hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to go. So, and then a couple weeks later, we kicked off conversations and talked about, the deal parameters, et cetera. And at that time, so that was August when we filmed. It aired in the second episode of season 12, which was October 23rd, as I recall, of 2020.
So when it aired, what kind of reception did you get?
Fantastic reception. Yeah. So it was excellent to be put right up at the beginning of the season because that was October. I think again in January, it aired again in prime time on ABC. And then it maybe aired a few more times. Definitely it's gone into the syndication, and I think it's CNBC or whatever the outlet is that has their reruns. And I noticed because I'll wake up and get an uptick of of orders like, oh, it must have been on Shark Tank last night. So it's really been great. The exposure has been terrific.
So that's kind of a big piece of the whole Shark Tank recipe, is that you're getting national or international exposure to your product. Do you end up giving something back to ABC and the people who make Shark Tank, or no?
No, as I understand it, for the first 4 seasons, something to that effect was a part of the program. And I don't know the full parameters. Anyone can Google it. Right. But I think Mark Cuban maybe, spearheaded the initiative to have that not take place. That's again, nice. As I understand it. So I read it a while ago, but
international publicity, and that's when more and more consumers and dog lovers all over started picking up Pooch paper.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we focused on, because we launched literally 2 weeks before lockdown in the pandemic, not the best time to launch a business. But we focused on retail, had to pivot a bit. But by the time 1 year had passed, we grew our retail distribution in the U.S. to encompass about 2,500 stores nationwide. And now we're selling in those outlets anywhere from big box down to, mom and pop retail and everything in between. And 4 other countries outside of the U.S., and that would be Canada, Dubai, South Africa, and Japan.
So what is next for you, Tracy?
To capture as many municipalities and multi-tenant residential buildings, property management companies as possible.
And you're running all of this from your home in Annapolis?
Yes.
And and what is that like to basically be putting an international business together from your home?
It's good. It's challenging because I don't have an issue with the time zone differences as and when that happens. With Wall Street, I've been working internationally for over 20 years, but just the post-COVID environment has been a challenge, just because people are seeing people fewer and far between on occasion. And some of the conferences that we wanted to attend in 2020 were, of course, virtual. It's tougher to have a discussion. And my product obviously has some type of educational component to it. And why is this important? How do you use it? And, really how easy is it to use? And what a easy way to replace a daily consumable with something that's much better for the planet. But sometimes it takes time. And this year, so 2021 that just passed, we were able to participate in some of the expositions, particularly for government and Parks and Rec. And it makes a world of difference when you have a 10 by 10 booth and you can do a demonstration, have people take samples home, be able to, we always have Play-Doh for live demonstration purposes.
I was going to say, what do you use as a proxy for the poop? It's
Play-Doh. Yeah. And it's great because the concept of
how many microplastics are in the Play-Doh though, Tracy?
I know. Well, I reuse it as often as I can until it gets solid. But it's just easy because every 110% of the time when somebody is in front of you and they use the product, they say, "That's it?" I said, "Yeah, that's it." "Oh, I thought my hand would get dirty. I thought there wouldn't be enough space on the sheet. I thought, myriad of things." And I said, "Look, a typical plastic bag is 13 by 8. And the 13, probably 5 of it or 4 inches of it are up on your wrist. So really the surface area you're using to pick up the waste is the palm of your hand. Our sheets are 12 by 12 or 14 by 14. They're really large compared to the alternative that's out there today. So in, taking and twisting, there's plenty of room to twist and hold it up top the way you would with a bag and, so on. So it helps to get in front of somebody and have that discussion versus over the phone.
That's awesome. Well, I like Pooch Paper. You know why I like it so much?
Why?
It's not the microplastics, because I didn't know about those. It is the fact that I am so tired of the blowing into those plastic bags, because that feels so ugh. But I can't, even in the grocery store, I can't separate those bags. And so I've spent such a lot of my life blowing into green, blue poop bags, and Pooch Paper eliminates that.
It does. It also, this is really gross, but I'll say it anyway. When you pick up with plastic, it's pretty warm, isn't it? So that heat transfer somehow goes away. I wasn't planning that, but it does. It's a lot less hot when you pick up with Pooch Paper.
So when you have traveled, when you have done some traveling, have you encountered Pooch Paper in the wild?
I have not, except the first time I saw it in the wild was in Central Park. And I was walking my dog, and I was on the bridle trail around the reservoir up on the upper west side area. And there were a couple of Pooch Papers that were clearly in someone's pocket, and they dropped, and it wasn't my pocket. And I thought, oh my gosh, I remember I took a picture. I sent it to my mom right away. I'm like, this wasn't me. Look, someone else has it.
Real people are using my Pooch Paper.
Yeah, which is awesome. Really exciting. Yeah.
Well, continued success to you. And we will continue to follow what you guys are doing, because it's some pretty cool stuff. And now we have a new thing to worry about, microplastics. And and you're making the environment a better place, and making it a little bit easier to care for our dogs. Thank you so much for being with us. Tracy Rosensteel, thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that about does it for today's episode of The Long Leash. I want to thank you for hitting that play button and joining us. We will be back again with another episode of The Long Leash. If you'd like to check out some of our past episodes, you can do that on our website at longleashshow.com. That's longleashshow.com. We have a whole bunch of other shows at Dog Podcast Network, which you can check out, and the website for that is dogpodcastnetwork.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, just reach out via one of those websites, and we'd love to hear from you. On behalf of all the folks here at Dog Podcast Network, I'm James Jacobson, wishing you and your dog a very warm aloha.